Hi everyone, my name is Maureen Cech. I'm the University Archivist and Special Collections Librarian here at Misericordia University. I know you've made a lot of great memories during your time at Misericordia, so I'm going to show you some things of what you can do with your print photographs. There are a lot of things I can cover, so I'm going to try to cover some of the big topics and separate things out into what's ideal and what's doable, so that you can enjoy your treasures for a long time to come. Some of the things that I will talk about first are, the best advice to prolonging the life of your photographs is dealing with environmental conditions, preventative measures around good storage, environmental conditions, and handling. So the ideal recommendations I'm going to make may not be doable for everyone. You want to consider time and cost of preserving your items, especially around if you're going to invest into different kinds of supplies that I might show you. So, they vary in terms of cost and what you want to invest in them. And one of the best things you might want to do is prioritize what you have around, what's more fragile, what you want to do as far as your plan for your treasures goes, whether you want to share them, whether you want to display them, whether you think they'll get a lot of handling, or if you just want to be able to store and preserve them. So a couple things I'm going to go over first are the environmental conditions. So that includes things like regulating the temperature and humidity of wherever you're keeping your photographs, pest control, limiting exposure to light, and what you're storing your photos in, where and how. So relative humidity and temperature are some of the easiest things you can control, and they do have one of the biggest impacts on prolonging the life of your photos. So relative humidity is the amount of moisture in the air relative to a given temperature. When it comes to humidity, right, in the air, you want to have about 45 to 55% relative humidity to a temperature. And typically the colder the better is really ideal for photographs. We keep our homes pretty comfortable for ourselves, right? So we tend to keep, our relative humidity and temperature something comfortable for us to live and work in. What you want to really think about is then where you're storing your photographs. So the location of this is very important. You don't want to, as much as possible, store your photos in attics, basements, or garages because they're very sensitive to extremes in both humidity and temperature. Attics can be very dry, they can be very hot, they can also be prone to leaks, same with basements, and same with garages. So those are the kinds of places that are more prone to big swings in humidity and temperature. So ideally, you'd want to keep any treasure that you have within the interior of your home, the interior proper, an interior room, like a closet as well. Also with humidity and temperature, the higher the humidity, right, you're attracting pests. That encourages, pests and mold growth. So those are all kinds of things that you want to be aware of, is where you're storing your photographs and the kinds of problems that can then result from high temperature and humidity. So photos that are paper-based, right? Most of us have paper-based photos. They're the most common, kinds of photographic prints from the 20th century that we pretty much all have. They are very sensitive to humidity, the amount of moisture in the air, because paper itself is very sensitive to humidity. So it can absorb a lot of moisture or it can become very dry, depending on where you're storing your photos. So I have some examples here. A little bit of a curl to this photo because it was in a little bit too dry of an environment. But one of the great things about paper is that it's very resilient, so that if you put it into an environment that has a little bit more humidity in the air, it'll flatten right back out. So it can absorb more moisture if you put it into the right environment. But that's the kind of thing that can happen if the humidity is a little bit too low. Okay, so one thing you really want to think about too is what is your plan, right? So looking through the kinds of photos that you have, take stock of how much you have, take stock of what kinds of photos that you have, their sizes, their condition, because that will really help you prioritize which ones you may want to spend more time with, spend more money on if you need to, in order to preserve it. So you want to think about, like I said initially, what do you want to do with them, right? Do you want to display them? Do you want to share them? Do you want to digitize them right from the beginning? Do you expect them to have a lot, be handled quite a bit? And that will help you figure out how to store them, what you want to put them in, and which ones might need more care. Some of the things that we have for storing photos, right? You can store them in folders. You can store them in plastic sleeves of different sizes, like these. You can store them in album pages that might have multiple pockets for the different sizes. Archival envelopes are also a really good option and tend to be less expensive than the plastic. These can also help with any kind of condition, right? They'll help keep your items flat, same with the plastic. You can use different kinds of boxes. When you are storing your photos, whether they're in envelopes or boxes or folders, one thing you want to make sure is that you store them all facing the same direction. You don't want to have the image sides facing one another. So those are the emulsion sides because they can stick together if you do have an issue with humidity or temperature, and trying to get those apart is very difficult once they're stuck together. So you always want them facing the same way. One thing that you may see, I'm doing it now, and if you are a viewer of Antiques Roadshow or similar shows like that, you might see professionals wearing gloves, right, when they handle materials like this. It is important you can wear gloves when you handle photographs because you do not want to touch the emulsion, the image, with your bare hands, because the oils in our hands can leave fingerprints on the image's surface that are either impossible to get off or very difficult. If you don't have gloves, cotton gloves aren't super expensive, they're pretty easy to come by. You can always handle around the sides. This is a mounted photo. Or you could handle underneath if you have something bigger. One more thing that almost everybody has are magnetic albums. And these are the kinds that have that very kind of distinct sound when you pull the plastic up, right? So they are just a big sheet of adhesive that you then put your photos in and pull this plastic over and they stay in place. These are very common and they're very difficult to deal with. So a couple things that you can do with these if you want to try to preserve these. Sometimes the best thing is to do nothing with them, because if you get overly ambitious with them, you can end up damaging the prints far more than just leaving it alone. There's really only sometimes two options I've seen with these, is either that the adhesive is stuck in there forever and you can't get it out, or the adhesive has started to dry and the photos just pop right out. That's sometimes the best case scenario because then you don't really have to do much to it. So you can just leave them as is. Sometimes trying to get them out will cause more damage. But if you do want to try to take them out, you can test some corners to see if it'll come out easily. I do not recommend you use anything sharp to do that because you can poke right through the base of the photo and right through your emulsion, and then you've damaged the photo. One trick I have read about is, if you're finding something's a little bit loose, is to take some dental floss and go behind your photo to try to lift the adhesive out. Now, this will require you to be very patient and very careful and very slow so that you don't end up damaging the photo further and taking any layers of paper off of the base without you knowing about it. So dental floss, it's not sharp, so you won't necessarily poke right through the emulsion, but it will take some patience to do it if that's what you want to do. Keep in mind though that albums are created very intentionally by the person who put them together. So if you are taking it apart, think about if that's important to you, right? To keep the context and structure of the photos. How were they put in? Were they put in a certain order? Are they around a certain topic or trip or time? So that might be something that you want to think about before you start taking albums apart. And then what are you going to do with these loose photos once you do take them out of the album? Finally, some don'ts. In addition to being careful with any kind of album, don't try to do any first aid on your photos with any kind of tape or glue, because most tapes and glues, any kind of adhesive, you can even see in this, that it's very acidic, so it will start to deteriorate. It can stain your photos and cause further damage. So again, sometimes the best answer is to leave it alone as much as possible. If you do have something that's ripped, putting it in a plastic sleeve like this will at least keep it together, and it will, sometimes the static from both sides of the plastic will keep it in place a little bit more. But that will, going back to your plan of what do you have, what are the condition issues that you're running into, will help you figure out maybe that's not, there are certain ones that won't get a lot of handling. Maybe those are the ones you want to scan right off the bat as well, because scanning can also contribute to the preservation of your materials. So thank you everyone for watching. I'll also be sharing some more resources if you want to be the historian or archivist for your family and for your treasures. There are a lot of great resources out there that get into a lot more depth than I have, and resources for materials moving forward. And I'm also happy to answer questions if you guys have them. So thank you very much.